to Around the 412. We are part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I am Tyler, and with me as always is my co-host, Smitty. What's going on, man? Happy Monday to everybody. How are we feeling today?
I hope everybody enjoyed the Super Bowl. We're kind of letting you behind the scenes here. We are recording before the Super Bowl happens. I wish we could tell you that we're very excited or very upset with how the Super Bowl went, but I got no idea how we're feeling. So I can't tell you the Penguins just played, coming off a win. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later in the show. As always, as we do with every show, we're going to take a question from Twitter to start it off. When's the last time we talked about the Pirates on here? I honestly, probably like the season when the season ended. I would say
I don't even think we've talked about the Pirates really since we've been on DK that much. I think we talked about them a little bit in September, but it quickly went away whenever like hockey and Steelers picked up. So it's been a minute.
And especially with the MLB being locked out, like, hey, are we even allowed to talk about the Pirates? No, I'm just kidding.
This might be one of the only times we talk about the Pirates all year.
There's a whole show on the network, the Pirates Fan Forum. Shout out to those guys. I have no idea how they continue to do it through a lockout, but we did get a question about the Pirates. One of the concessions that we've seen here, actually something that the MLB and the Players Association are agreeing to through these talks, is a universal DH. Something that we've kind of known has been coming. It's been a long time coming. There's arguments on both sides, for or against. Doesn't matter. It is going to happen in the National League as well as it has been with the American League. So how does this impact the Pirates? Chris Coburn comes to us from Twitter and wants to know that. How does a universal DH impact the Pirates roster? I'll let you go first. I have some thoughts on this, but it's more so down the line than it really is like next season. So I'll see where you can take it first.
For the Pirates in general, the pitchers that I think that like to hit or could hit at least a little bit, most of them I feel like are off the roster at this point. So as it comes to the Pirates, well, yeah, his future with the Pirates is I don't know. I don't really know how much he has left, but to be fair, he can hit. But I was thinking even Trevor Williams. And some other guys, they're kind of off the team, so I don't know how much is going to impact the Pirates necessarily. But honestly, I'm just very open to it in general. Outside of just the Pirates, in the MLB, I don't know why you have two different leagues that have the same different rules. I don't know why under the MLB you just have one single rule, whether it's you bat as a pitcher or you just have a DH. I don't know why the American League and the National League have been so different for such a long time. And to me, I don't really care at this point. I always thought that maybe I'm of the mindset of I like the traditional style of having the pitcher bat, even if it is just a free out for the other team most of the time, or it's just going to be a attempted sacrifice bunt. I have always liked the idea that everybody that is playing on the field is also the ones batting on the field. But I'm really at the point where I just don't care anymore, and I would just rather be uniform throughout the entire MLB than just one or the other. And so I think we saw the DH 2 years ago when we had that shortened season, and I was fine with it then. And we didn't know if they were going to keep it necessarily into the last season. They ended up not doing that, but I think that moving forward, they probably will because, honestly, offense is what drives baseball. So getting another hitter in there, even if that's the only thing that they're doing, is probably better for the game in general in terms of interest in the sport. I think that offense and hitting is what people are attracted to at this point. And so I know I haven't really talked about how it affects the Pirates that much, but I just think it's in baseball in general. I think that going to a universal DH is probably the better thing for the sport, not just for the fan interest, but I just think having a uniform thing is better in the long run. That they're not switching back and forth, and even in the World Series, you would switch back and forth, and I just think it's kind of unfair because I always thought that pitch or coaching in the National League is so much more difficult than it is in the American League because you don't have to worry about double switching and who's up next in the lineup when it comes to bringing in different relief pitchers. It's a lot more relaxed managing, I feel like, in the American League, where you don't really have to worry about that. Your pitcher can just go out there and it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the batting order. Meanwhile, in the National League, it always did. And so I just thought that was kind of unfair, even like at the World Series level. And I know that you play on both sides of it, but I think it once it is the same, no matter what, it'll be better for baseball.
Yeah. So my whole thing, I understand like people saying, they want to see pitchers hit. Like, why shouldn't they? They should be able to do everything just like the other 8 guys. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I just think it's a different argument than the one that I always try to make, because at some point in the minor leagues, pitchers aren't hitting. They stop them from hitting unless they're playing American League on American League in the minor at AAA. I don't know how you can expect pitchers, even though they would have hit throughout high school and college and everything like that, to then all of a sudden be able to pick a bat back up and face major league competition.
You're seeing it nowadays where, I'm saying maybe they might hit in high school and college. You're seeing it nowadays where a lot of pitchers, if they're good enough, they're not even hitting in high school. They're only worried about pitching. And same thing with college. They're only worried about pitching. Yeah. Like I remember that one, I think of the clip from the kid from LSU who was a pitcher who was asked to hit and he was like, did you hit in high school? And he was like, yeah. And he was lying because he wanted to actually try to hit. And so like some kids nowadays, they aren't even hitting in high school and in college. And how can they expect to be able to like go up through the systems of the MLB and then get to the National League? And you haven't hit in probably 10 years since you were like 14, but you have to hit now. So figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, well, regardless of when it is that they stop hitting to focus always on pitching. And then all of a sudden, if you were in the National League, you're expected to pick a bat back up. And that's ridiculous to me. So that should not be a thing. Whether the argument you want to make is that they should be hitting the whole time through, or what the MLB is going to do now with the universal DH, that's going to be the resolution. How it affects the Pirates, the first name that comes to mind for me is O'Neal Cruz. As much as I would like things to work out for him in the field somewhere because the arm's too good, it would be an anomaly. I'd love to see him play defensively somewhere. I'd love to see him stick it short, to be honest with you. But there's just going to be a logjam, here very soon. Hopefully, we hope that these guys pan out. If all these prospects pan out, we're going to be talking about needing to find a spot in the lineup for O'Neal Cruz's bat specifically. And whether it's, Liover Peguero taking over at short and Nick Gonzalez at second. And then where do you put a guy like O'Neal Cruz? That bat needs to be in the lineup. So I think the DH opens that up. Or, specifically short term here, maybe they can go out and actually find a guy that plays the first base position and let Yoshi be the DH, because very small sample size, but defensively, he was not it at first base. So it opens up a lot of possibilities here. But for me, those are the two guys that come to mind, both short term for Yoshi, long term for O'Neal Cruz. And that's under the assumption with a long term project there that these other prospects around him are panning out to even open the door for that. Because again, it's only going to be the case if we have a logjam in the middle infield.
I wasn't even thinking about the positional players, honestly. Whenever they thought about how does this affect the Pirates, I was only thinking about pitchers that wouldn't be hitting. So I'm happy that you were able to think about that.
Yeah, and that's honestly where my mind went right away. It's, right now when you look at the roster, it's like, man, I'll be honest, there's not like a guy that's on the bench right now that I'm pounding the table like this guy's bat needs to be in the lineup. But down the line, when hopefully these prospects are up here, and we're having these conversations, we have too many bats that we would like to see in the lineup, and now this opens up, the door for one of them to be their bat, at least to be in the lineup, not their glove. And I know people have concerns about O'Neal Cruz being able to stick at short. What would happen at right field? What would happen at first base? Just picturing that, I'm not able to do. It seems like it'd be very awkward for him at first base, but I don't know. But hey, I don't know. For me, the more position players that we're going to have the opportunity to hit, the better. I don't want to see pitchers trying to hit at the major league level after not doing it for so long. So I think that's where we can leave the conversation off on this. And that's where we can also take a break. When we come back, we're going to briefly touch on TJ Watt finally winning his Defensive Player of the Year and getting into some Penguins talk. We'll be right back. This is Around the 412 on the DJ Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. And welcome back to Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm Smitty. That is Tyler. a big congratulations to TJ Watt finally winning Defensive Player of the Year. Seems like it's been 3 years in the making, ever since 2019, where he really broke out in a big way and looked like the best defensive player in football. Stephon Gilmore wins it last year. Aaron Donald wins it over him. Finally, this year, TJ Watt is crowned, receives 42, I think it was originally put out as 40, but there's only 48 votes within that number. So I believe it's actually 42 votes, first place NFL Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, it's even, and it's crazy because, how much of the year was he banged up too? Like, we didn't even really get a healthy TJ Watt much of the season, and still the production was there. And you look around him and see the lack of talent, to be quite honest with you, on the defensive side of the football. I know that there's like a big argument right now. Was he better in 19, 20, or 21? To me, 21 was his most impressive work, just due to the injuries and also the lack of talent playing around him, because other than Cam Hayward and Minkah Fitzpatrick, that defense wasn't much to write home about this year, to put it quite bluntly.
Yeah, to really break out the way he did. I mean, I say break out in 21 whenever he's been this player the whole time. It's just it is
another level, though, different. I think. I mean,
yeah, it feels a little different. And being able to do what he did in realistically 14 and a half games. I know you can argue people were saying like, well, put an asterisk on it. It's a 17-game season with his sack totals. But I mean, if you look at the actual games he played in, he missed 2 full games, and then he only played in half of. It was one of the early season games. Was it Oakland? Maybe I'm not sure, but
Oakland. You mean Vegas?
or Vegas?
Throwing it,
yeah,
Vegas, and I mean Minnesota. He missed he's been in and out of a lot of games this year, to be quite honest.
So realistically, you could say he probably played between 14 and 15 games this season of a 17-game season. But that's what makes it so impressive, is that he was able to do that in that short amount of time. And like you said, the defense definitely did take a step back in terms of talent, especially on that front line. I mean, you didn't have Stephon Tuitt up there. You didn't have Bud Dupree up there. And I feel like he had to really step up in a way that he hadn't really had to, even though he was so good in previous years up on that front seven. And I just think that third time's the charm. He should have won it last year. He should have won it the year before that. I think you could make the argument that this should have been his third in a row. But finally, he did win it. And I love that he tweeted a year ago the Michael Jordan meme, and I took that personally, and then quote tweeted it this year with him winning the award. That's pretty great.
Yeah, I do want to say real quick, I do want to give credit to, especially the way that he finished the season. Alex Highsmith did come on in a big way, I thought, the last few weeks. And I am excited about his development, and I think he should continue to get better. But yeah, no Stephon Tuitt. They lost Tyson Alualu in the home opener. Cam Hayward was great this year as well. Really nothing from the middle linebackers. The secondary was decent, obviously, but that's not really helping him as a pass rusher, as a run stopper. So a lot of it was on TJ's shoulders this year, and he answered the bell. I want to ask you a question, though. It's obviously hindsight. This means absolutely nothing now, but I think it's an interesting question to pose, and I'm curious as to what the people in the comments will say too. Does he still win Defensive Player of the Year if the Steelers don't make the playoffs?
Honestly, probably not, and that's the shame of football in general, I think. Or not just even football. I think it's sports. If your team does not make the playoffs, I feel like it doesn't matter how good you were. That is just going to be held against you, even though that's really not your fault. And it's an individual award, but they're going to look at, okay, your team didn't make the playoffs, so how good have you actually been? Which I think is just unfair. If TJ Watt would have done the exact same thing, except the Jaguars did not beat the Colts and the Steelers do not make the playoffs, I still think TJ Watt is Defensive Player of the Year. Whether the voters hold that against him, that the Steelers are in the playoffs or not, that's yet to be seen. And then, like you said, hindsight's 2020. It didn't happen.
Yeah,
but in my opinion, I don't think that he would have got it, and it probably would have went to like Aaron Donald or somebody, or Micah Parsons, someone that actually made the playoffs. Just because that's kind of the way that the sports world goes in terms of these awards and like the voting and everything. Like if you don't make playoffs, that team, it's going to be held against you. And I think it's very unjustly so. I don't really think for an individual award that matters as much, but because he's one of 11 on that defense, I just think that would have been the case.
It would be an anomaly just because the last one to do it was 2014. It was his brother that actually the Texans went 9-7, missed the playoffs, but JJ still won Defensive Player of the Year. The reason that I've gone back and forth with it. I lean that he still would have just because of the discrepancy there in the voting. Like if it was close, I don't think that he would have, but going based off the voting numbers, I think that he still would have. But yeah, I mean, we really don't know. So hey, once again, shout out to Trevor Lawrence and Daniel Carlson for getting the Steelers in the playoffs and kind of putting it to rest, making it a non-topic. But really, that's like the only thing to talk about with the Steelers. Finally, TJ Watt gets his Defensive Player of the Year. He says it only is going to motivate him more because he's still got to catch JJ now. So he's got one. He's in the box score. Let's see how many he can get. You mentioned he should have had at least one
more.
Yeah, you mentioned he should have had at least one already.
He should be tied right now. Let's be real.
Yeah, I didn't have as much of an issue with 2020 as with 2019. I think he definitely should have won in 2019, and it goes back to, hey, Steelers sneaked in the playoffs. Does he win it over Gilmore? I don't know. We'll never know that. But
Gilmore was also overrated that year. That's another thing. Just saying.
Oh boy,
Steven Nelson had similar.
Let's see if we can find. Let's see if we can find some Patriots fans and bring them in the comments on this episode. Let's switch gears a little bit, since that is really the only thing to talk about with the Steelers, and talk about the Penguins. Coming off another win against the New Jersey Devils. We're still waiting on 500 for Sid. But I'll tell you what, like guys that really have been sticking out to me, I know, and it's very fitting because our very first episode that was on the network, we talked about Brian Boyle coming in on a PTO and not knowing whether he was going to make the team even, let alone what impact he would have with a healthy roster. Now, the Penguins haven't had really a healthy roster, so he has been called upon quite a bit. But how can anyone sit there and say that this guy hasn't exceeded, not just lived up to, exceeded expectations with the way that he's played?
No, he's been great. And I think that we were probably looking at him before the season saying, like, he's probably one of the first forwards out if everybody's healthy on this team. But he's been a great fourth line center. And it's funny because before the season, I was like, I don't really know how Brian Boyle is going to mesh with the team, seeing as he's not really the prototypical Penguin forward, and he's not like speedy like the rest of the forwards, and like doesn't really have that drive of the game. But that fourth line, especially this past week, has been like really driving their game and
the Island of Misfit Toys
really well. Yeah, and Brian Boyle on Sunday against the New Jersey Devils, he had 2 points himself, a goal and an assist. I just think that he's been a great addition for the team. Another guy that was able to get out of a little bit of a slump this week was Jeff Carter. I think he got a goal on Thursday night against, who was that? Senators. So I had to look at who we played.
Scored the only goal with a goalie in net.
It was nice to see other people score besides the top line. I mean, we did get a lot of the top line scoring either way. I mean, Gensel had 2 goals this week. Brian Rust scored in every single game because, of course, he did. But to get a couple guys throughout the lineup that was scoring that weren't either on the top power play unit or on the top line with Sid, Jake, and Gensel, or Jake and Gensel, Sid, Jake, and Rust, it was good to see this week. And the fact that we won all 3 games in regulation and didn't really have to sweat any of these out and worry about getting that extra point, that was also nice to see, because the Penguins are now sitting in first place in the Metropolitan Division again.
Yeah, whether that's temporary or not, we'll see. But yeah, it's crazy with everything that this team's undergone. I mean, every week we can just keep coming back to the job that Mike Sullivan has done with this team. And again, I'll say it, a player that exemplifies that more than anybody else is what we've seen from Mike Matheson this year, who I think is playing the best hockey, not just in his time in Pittsburgh, in his career. That goes back to Florida when he was handed the extension that he's currently playing on. I've never seen a player really like turn it around like this, but it's no surprise that it's happening in Pittsburgh, in my opinion, just because it's a testament to how good of a head coach Mike Sullivan is. Perfect deployment, perfect partner in Chad Ruedel to play with. There's not much more I can say about Mike Matheson. We knew how good of a skater he was. We knew the upside that he has in the offensive zone, but he's not making those mistakes in his own end right now either, and that's why they're getting the most out of him.
Yeah, and I gotta say, we have to take a little bit of credit for saying that he should be with
Do
Chad
we?
Ruhwedel. We
Okay.
do, because we've always been firm believers in Chad Ruhwedel, and we
Yeah.
knew that he would be the right partner for Mike Matheson to let him be the offensive player that he likes to be. Chad Ruhwedel can be the steady defenseman that we always have known that he is. And so, yeah, I think we had to take a little bit of credit of that. But yeah, Mike Matheson has had a great year, and he scored another goal and an assist on Sunday. And he's just adding on to it. I really think that also, I haven't really paid attention enough. Have the Penguins made the switch to put Matheson on the second power play unit yet instead of Marino? Or is it still Marino on there? Because if it is, I have no idea why Matheson isn't on there.
That's actually a great question, because the second power play didn't see a ton of time in this game, just because one of the Penguins power plays was right at the end of the first period. So it kind of like they just kept that first unit out there because they knew they were about to get a break anyway with the intermission coming up. The second power play was out there. I want to say it was still Marino.
Yeah, because I'm looking at Daily
with
Face-Off, and it's Marino still on there. And I listen, I like John Marino. I just don't think he's had that stellar of a year. And the way Mike Matheson is going, how do you not put him on the second power play unit over Marino?
Yeah, so John Marino, like people, it's been actually a pretty hot topic. I'm glad that you brought his name up, just because there's so many people talking about him right now on social media. I think like with him, we've seen his defensive game kind of go to the next level. Like him and Pettersson are a really good duo. We've seen him step into a role in the penalty kill to take some of that away from Chris Letang. But from an offensive standpoint, he really has. We haven't seen like what we saw his rookie year in Pittsburgh since his rookie year. And, I think that we're just kind of still waiting for that to really like crown him as the heir to the throne for Chris Letang here in Pittsburgh. But you're right. Like with that not happening, why shouldn't it be Mike Matheson, a guy that we know can drive play, and be that point man, on the power play. So, will they do it? I don't know, because I think that there's probably still part of Sullivan that knows the danger in doing that, especially if you're only going to go with one defenseman out there. But maybe they do something like putting both out there. I don't know, but letting Matheson kind of be the
honestly,
guy
you might as well, because I'm looking at the second power play unit, and you've got Jeff Carter, Evan Rodriguez, Danton Heinen, Kasperi Kapanen, and John Marino.
Yeah,
honestly, take Kapanen out of there. He's just useless at this point, especially on the power play. So I would not mind just having the second defenseman, and in that case, you would have a right and a left-handed defenseman up there. So that would be a safe bet. Yeah, Kapanen has just basically been useless to the team for the past few weeks. Honestly, most of the season. It's really sad to see. So yeah, take him off.
Well, it's the thing is too, it's like, what's really redeeming about his game right now? Because other guys that don't score, like the Zach Aston Reese, Dominic Simones of the world, like they are really good in their own end, in their kind of like the analytical darlings. Yeah. Of the team. And you can't have like too many of those guys. That's why I always say, like, when the Penguins do get healthy, you got to pick between one of those two. In my opinion, it's going to be Zach Aston Reese. But with a guy like Kasperi Kapanen, if he's not, contributing offensively, what's he bringing to this team? And I don't know, like, we're getting to the point where now his name's being thrown around in trade rumors and such. I don't know what his value is, but I have a hard time believing that when healthy, I can look at him as one of their 12 best forwards. I'm assuming he's still going to stay in the lineup, but yeah, he's been disappointing to say the least. This is a guy that I picked to lead the team in goals, by the way. We can keep going back to that because I look like an idiot more and more each game. But
yeah, I got to be honest. Whenever I think about who should come out of the lineup if this team's fully healthy, I can't really think of a reason that, like, I would rather have like a guy like Radim Zohorna in the lineup than Kasperi Kapanen at this point. I think he adds more value to your team and adds more production to your team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just what he brings, like, you look at the underlying numbers. I know that Danny actually put this out there recently. Zohorna, in games that he's played when his line is out there, the chances that his line creates as opposed to gives up, the discrepancy there is like the most on the team, just in the games that he's played, obviously, not, looking at that number raw season long, but just in the games that he's played, the possession metrics are great for him. So, Yeah, I mean, I'm with you in that I would be playing him too. We know it's not going to happen. Really what we're hanging on to is just what we saw in spurts last year and the potential of him. But I have a hard time believing that this is a guy that's a restricted free agent at season's end too. That right now he's one of the best 12 forwards, and I have a hard time believing that for a guy that didn't trade for him in Ron Hextall, he has interest in bringing him back with the way that he's played.
Yeah, and realistically, what's going to happen, and we're still probably a few weeks away from this happening, but whenever Teddy Bluger comes back from injury, what are we going to do with Brian Boyle? Are we moving him to the wing on that fourth line, or what's going to happen there? And then when Jason Zucker also comes back, honestly, like who would you rather have in the lineup, Jason Zucker or Kasperi Kapanen? I don't really know how to answer that question because of how bad both of these guys. Like, I just don't think that they are in their best 12 forwards to put on the ice, at least the way they're playing right now. And so I think that whenever both those guys come back, it makes it even harder because you don't want to take like Boyle out of the lineup because of the way that he's been playing on that fourth line. But how are you going to take like Kasperi Kapanen out of the lineup? Because and I feel like it's not even based off of his play. It's just based off of the name and what the Penguins gave up for him and what kind of player he could be, but he's not being right now.
Yeah. See, the thing for me with those two names specifically, Zucker and Kapanen, I think when Zucker's been available, he's been the better of the two. But the problem is, at least Kasperi Kapanen's going to be available. Jason Zucker just has not been able to get healthy for this team. And, is he going to down the stretch? I don't know. I'm not really relying on him right now. And, as bad as that sounds, whenever he comes back, we can start having that conversation. But I'm not even looking at him as one of the guys I'm talking about. You mentioned, when Teddy Bluger comes back, that's really, to me, like the domino that has to fall here is because now you have 6 centers, really, if you want to include Evan Rodriguez in that. But we know that he'll play wing. So, yeah, the question becomes, is it Carter that plays wing, like on Malkin's wing, and then you still have Boyle playing center? To me, that's honestly the way that I lean as opposed to having Boyle play wing. I would play down the middle, Sid, Gino, Bluger, Boyle, with Carter playing on Gino's wing.
So do you take Kapanen off of his wing or you take Brock McGinn? These lines
Kapanen's going to take himself off that wing because, I mean, we've seen how many games that he started with Gino
Mike Sullivan's
going to
take him off the wing because he's going to start on that wing, but by halfway through the first period, he'll be on the fourth line.
And I think that Carter's a nice safety net for Gino because if, Gino's not the best face-off guy in the world anyways, but, even with him being eased back in, we saw that's why he started with Carter on his wing. I think that they could go back to that well, and it lets Gino, cheat on face-offs, to be quite honest with you, every now and then, and just know, hey, if I get kicked out of the face-off draw, we got another center to turn to and Carter to take it. So I think it takes some of that burden away as well.
Maybe they put Danson Heinen up on Malkin's wing with Carter, and they test that out and see how that goes. And then you put McGinn back with Bluger and Zach Aston Reese, and then you throw Boyle and Kapanen and then Simone, I guess, all in the same line.
Yeah, or Zahorna, or man, that's going to be. We talked about Island of Misfit Toys. That would definitely fall into that category if that's how things shake out. But who knows? We're just spitballing here. Who knows how things are going to shake out? I mean, we keep talking about when they're healthy. When has that ever been the case? We just keep going.
Honestly,
back to
never.
the same things.
It's just a good thing to see. Despite all the player issues that we have with the Penguins and how people are performing, they won 3 out of 3 games this week, all in regulation.
They have more guys. They have more guys that are doing like what Brian Boyle and Mike Matheson are doing than what Kapanen are doing. It's just we're bringing up one thing here about this team, but obviously they're in first place. You have a ton of guys that are playing at the level they should be or have overachieved when you look at the season long, not like just recent streaks like the slump that Evan Rodriguez has been in. But there's a reason they're in the spot that they are. And definitely very encouraged by overall what this team's done. Even Casey Smith as of late, he just got a shutout in his last game. And, maybe he is a viable backup option for this team. My worst fear is that he plays well until after the trade deadline and then falls apart. But as of right
hopefully
now,
he's
definitely
healthy after that.
Yeah, that's very true too. He just needs to kind of, weather the storm, if you will, and play that role to perfection until we get Louis Domingue back, and then at least gives us another option to turn to potentially. So, that's so unfortunate for him though, because it looked like he actually was going to have a shot, might have gotten one of those back-to-back games, and then he gets hurt, in practice and can't take the net. So,
I think Taylor cursed him. on
True.
podcast on Fifth Ave. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you want, you just send all hate to them right there. They are the ones that injured Louis Domingue.
Yeah, just don't do it to anybody else. But I don't think I have anything else unless you do.
Yeah, one little minor thing with the Penguins this week. The whole Brad Marchand incident.
Oh,
and
true. How do we not touch on this?
Yeah. First off, do we think that the 6 games was enough for what he was doing?
So based off NHL history, yes. But that's like a whole different discussion. That's why I have a problem with it, because it always just comes back to like, oh, that's the way it is, or that's been the sport. That's the way the league is. Like, why? Like, why is that the answer to this? Why should it be that way? Just because it has been that way, and just an unwillingness to change the hockey culture, if you will. And the answer there's more people that take issue with the fact that the Penguins didn't come to his defense than the act itself. And to be quite honest with you, though, like in real time, it's kind of tough to see. And even like going back and watching, it's not like he made much of an effort. But Chris Letang did try to go after Brad Marchand when that happened.
Did try, and he was held back. Yeah. And then people trying to blame Sid. If you look at it, Sid didn't even see what had happened. He just saw people scuffling, like after the play. His back was turned to it. I think my most alarming thing about the whole situation is just how screwed up the hockey mentality is when it comes to stuff like that happens on the ice, because of not just the way that Marchand feels about it, where he thinks that, yeah, I shouldn't have done it, but I think that this is like way too, like getting the 6-game suspension is way too much for it.
Yeah. Like if it was anybody else.
Well, the thing that bothers me even more, and how this just shows how hockey mentally as a game is just so screwed up and how far gone it is that post game, Tristan Jarry is saying it's not really that big of a deal, and saying like, listen, a lot of guys, like, they get heated and it's in the moment stuff. It's on the ice, after the ice, it doesn't matter. I'm like, how screwed up is it that Tristan Jarry has to, or not even has to, he might actually believe what he's saying and think that, okay, it's really not that big of a deal. Whenever I think it's a huge deal, like for someone to basically attack the goalie like that. He tried to punch him, tried to get his stick in his face multiple times. And for Tristan Jarry to not really see a problem with that, being the reciprocant of all that stuff that's happening to him, I just think that it shows how screwed up the hockey culture and hockey mentality to some of this stuff is, and why some of these to the players, it's not a big deal when it should be.
Yeah, they're trained to think that way based off league precedent and just the way that the culture of hockey has been. So, that's the traditional way. It's part of the game, if you will. So,
yeah, it's the worst.
You're just supposed to live with it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. 6-game suspension for Brad Marchand. I believe that he's now been, I think he broke the record now for most individual suspensions. Not necessarily longest time spent suspended, but he's been suspended like 8 different times, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, congrats, pal. Making history out here against the Penguins.
Maybe Sidney Crosby will make history this week and get his 500th goal. We've been waiting on it.
Does it happen? Does it happen?
I'm hoping that it happens Tuesday against Philly at home, because how great would that be?
Maybe
but it's so funny. Anytime he's on the ice this past week, especially during that Boston game, I think he had that empty net goal. He passed it whenever he definitely could have shot it. But there's no way that Sidney Crosby is going to let his 500th goal in the NHL be an empty net goal. He wants to earn it and get it the right way. So I'm hoping that it comes Tuesday night against the Philadelphia Flyers, because how poetic would that be?
Yeah, the top line scored like 3 empty net goals this week, and none of them were Sid. So,
yeah,
unreal.
Yep, he's definitely going to keep passing. But they play the Flyers on Tuesday, the Maple Leafs on Thursday, and then we have the Hurricanes. Big matchup in that one on Sunday. There's been a lot of Sunday games for the Penguins the past month, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, by the time everybody's listening to this, the NFL season will be over. So now we can start to dive into really the offseason discussions surrounding the NFL. There is some big news, not necessarily with the Steelers, but around the league right now. Will any of them affect the Steelers? We'll talk about that more next week. But other than that, for Tyler, for For Smitty, this is Around the 412 on the Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Come back here every Monday. Well, Tuesday too for Yinsers. Every Monday at 2 p.m. Every day at 2 p.m. there is a new show premiering live right here. Check out all the shows. Other than that, like I said, Tyler, for Smitty, this is Around the 412. We'll talk to you guys next week. Until then, bye-bye.